The dock was bowing under a chorus of strangers chanting Kabinpalooza, while a shirtless man in floaties tried to barbecue on my cedar porch using my snow shovel as a spatula. A woman with a sash that read HOA President blew a whistle and yelled with an authoritative tone, "Wristbands are $20, cash or Venmo, restrooms through the owner's kitchen." 10 minutes later, she left in handcuffs while I pointed the sheriff to the spreadsheet on her clipboard labeled Juniper Falls Community Lodge Party RSVPS. I'm Evan Dorsey, 42 years old. Software guy. Quiet. My sanctuary is a small A-frame cabin on Black Otter Lake, sitting just outside the HOA limits of our neighborhood, Juniper Falls. I bought this place specifically because it wasn't part of the association. I stack wood, fish at dusk, and pretend emails don't exist. The cabin has been my weekend escape for 5 years, a place where I can write code without interruptions and watch the sunrise reflect off the water. Then Claudia Apprentice, with her juniper-scented perfume and steel-bun hair, HOA president for life, decided my solitude was non-compliant with community engagement initiatives. She'd fined me once for unsmiling porch lighting when I visited a friend inside the HOA boundaries. The fine was $75 for what she called aggressive darkness that diminished neighborhood charm. I paid just to avoid the conversation. Claudia ran Juniper Falls like her personal kingdom. She measured grass height with a ruler she kept in her purse. She once cited a neighbor for having their garbage cans visible from the street for 7 minutes past the allowed window. Her reign of terror included fining people for bird feeders that attracted non-native species, and demanding everyone use the same shade of beige for their fence stain, which she helpfully sold from her garage at 3 times hardware store prices. It started with flyers on the HOA bulletin board that read, Open Lake Lodge Community Access Days. My cabin, my address, my photo somehow. The photo showed my private dock, my canoe, even my coffee mug on the railing. Claudia told neighbors it was reclassified common space because my mailbox faced inward, which it doesn't, and because I had failed to register with the Community Wellness Committee, which didn't exist until she invented it that morning. Drones hovered over my property starting Monday. I counted 4 different ones, including one with a speaker that played what sounded like the HOA anthem Claudia had commissioned from her nephew's garage band. Teenagers posed on my dock for Instagram photos with captions like, Living my best lake life at the community lodge. Then a Facebook event sprang up titled, Kabinpalooza at Black Otter Free for Juniper Falls members. The event page used my name, my cabin, and a logo she'd mocked up showing a pine cone with a tiny gavel. The description claimed I had generously donated my property for community use as part of a reconciliation agreement, after my repeated violations of neighborhood unity standards. She'd even created a fake email address, evandorseyluveshoa@gmail.com, that was sending confirmations to everyone who clicked attending. Over the week, she stood at the gate checking off our SVPS like a bouncer at an exclusive club, complete with a velvet rope she'd borrowed from the local movie theater. She wore a different sash each day, progressing from HOA president to community coordinator to lake access supervisor, and finally, chief hospitality officer. She was citing a bylaw none of us had ever seen before, Section 11.4, Seasonal Gatherings and Shared Assets, which she claimed gave the HOA rights to any property that benefited from proximity to association-maintained roads. The fact that my private road connected to the county road, not the HOA street, didn't seem to matter to her. By Thursday, she had installed directional signs throughout Juniper Falls pointing to Community Lake Lodge, with arrows leading to my cabin. She'd hired her teenage son to hand out maps at the grocery store. The local radio station announced it during their community calendar segment, saying Claudia Apprentice had confirmed the event was fully sanctioned and insured. She'd even contacted a party rental company to deliver porta-potties to my property, though they called me first to confirm, and I told them absolutely not. By Saturday morning, 300 people showed up with coolers in tow. Cars lined the private road for half a mile. Someone had brought a bouncy castle and was inflating it on my lawn. A local band was setting up speakers on my deck, running extension cords through my windows. Claudia had set up a square card reader and a sign that said, Suggested donation $20 supports HOA security. She was wearing a money apron like a carnival ticket seller, making change from a metal box while her assistant, Margaret from the social committee, stamped hands with UV ink. She'd even zip-tied a laminated community lodge plaque to my railing, along with a list of rules that included no outside food or beverages, even though everyone brought their own, and respect the HOA-designated swimming zones, which she'd marked with pool noodles tied to my dock posts. The last straw came when she stuffed my spare key under a potted fern into a realtor lockbox and posted the code on the event page for everyone to see. The post said, "Bathroom access code 1234. Please be respectful of the historic interior." My cabin is 12 years old. She'd also posted a schedule showing hourly activities including tour of Evan's collection, which referred to my fishing rods, community sing-along in the great room, meaning my living room, and sunset yoga on the owner's deck, which she was personally leading despite having no certification. At 2:13 p.m., Claudia called the non-emergency line to report what she described in a panicked voice as a belligerent trespasser harassing a sanctioned HOA event. The trespasser was me, the owner, standing on my own porch asking people to leave. I was already on with county dispatch explaining my cabin was private property, not HOA controlled, while reading them my deed number and tax parcel information. The dispatcher seemed confused, saying they'd received multiple calls about a community event turned hostile. Then the fire marshal radioed in because Claudia had set off tiki torches under my pine trees, creating what he called an imminent wildfire risk. She'd blocked the driveway with 4 AT versus that belonged to her nephews, and jammed 300 bodies onto a 10-person dock that was already showing stress cracks. When the sheriff's Tahoe rolled up, Claudia marched over like she'd hired him personally. Her sash had rotated during the party and now read "Ident" on the visible side. She commanded in her most imperious tone, "Officer, remove him," while jabbing her clipboard at my chest. "This man is disrupting a permitted gathering on HOA-designated community property. I have all the documentation right here." She flipped through pages dramatically, each one making a snapping sound. I handed the deputy my deed, my property tax statement showing me as the sole owner, then showed him the Facebook event where she was claiming ownership, the Venmo page funneling donations to a Claudia Apprentice HOA with over $2,000 already collected, and the lockbox code post that had been shared 47 times. The deputy arched an eyebrow so high it nearly disappeared under his hat. The fire marshal started counting exits and shaking his head at the single narrow path to the dock. The conservation officer pointed at the lake where someone had tied an inflatable flamingo to my canoe cleats with speaker wire, and 3 jet skis were doing circles in the protected wildlife zone. A swan family that nested nearby was honking in distress. Someone had hung a piñata from my 100-year-old oak tree using climbing spikes that were damaging the bark. Everything flipped in 5 minutes. The deputy asked Claudia to confirm her authority to organize this event on private property. She produced a stapled packet containing 12 pages of made-up bylaws featuring Comic Sans headings and a watermark of her own face smiling. He radioed records and discovered no such filings existed with the county, no easements on my property, no community lodge designation anywhere in the official HOA documents. The real HOA bylaws, which another neighbor pulled up on their phone, were only 6 pages long and said nothing about commandeering private property. Meanwhile, 2 neighbors admitted they'd paid Claudia at the gate thinking it was official. One elderly couple said she'd told them the money went to lake preservation, and they'd donated $100. The fire marshal called the overcrowding a hazard, and started ordering people back from the dock. The conservation officer was taking photos of the shoreline damage from all the trampling and the illegal jet ski activity. I walked the deputy to my porch and lifted the fern to reveal the lockbox Claudia had installed that morning without permission, using a drill to screw it directly into my cedar siding. She chirped unhelpfully, "Codes 1234, officer. I made it simple for community access." The deputy glanced at me. I told him I'd never seen that lockbox before today. That's when the fraud and trespass picture got crystal clear for everyone watching. He asked her why she had installed a lockbox on someone else's property. She responded with a confident tone, "Section 11.4 clearly states," but the deputy cut her off, asking to see this Section 11.4. She shuffled through her papers, her confidence visibly deflating as she realized she'd only brought her fake version. The deputy read her rights while she tried to keep the sash straight for photos people were taking. Someone was live streaming on TikTok with the caption, "HOA president gets arrested at fake party." Charges included criminal trespass, obtaining money by false pretenses, creating a public nuisance, and filing a false report. She sputtered about community spirit and bringing neighbors together as they cuffed her. Someone yelled from the crowd, "Do we still get esmores?" Right as the fire marshal doused the tiki torches with a fire extinguisher, creating a hiss that sounded like justice being served. Margaret tried to grab the money box, but another deputy stopped her, marking it as evidence. They emptied her clipboard and found a spreadsheet of names with payment status, the Venmo total circled with hearts, and a printed agenda that included ribbon cutting at Evan's dock with a ribbon she'd already tied between two posts, karaoke in Evan's living room with a song list that was entirely Kenny Chesney, and owner confrontation de-escalation practice scheduled for 3 p.m. with talking points about helping antisocial neighbors integrate. There was also a contract with a food truck that she'd signed as property representative, and a receipt for 500 custom coasters with my address and Claudia's community lodge printed on them. The deputy handed me the clipboard in an evidence bag. I didn't know whether to laugh or frame it as a trophy. Cleanup took 2 hours with the sheriff's office escorting people off my land. A few apologized, baffled that an HOA president could be wrong about something so fundamental. One couple asked if they could get their donation back, and the deputy took their information. The band packed up their equipment, muttering about not getting paid. The bouncy castle deflated with a sad wheeze. Someone had to come retrieve the piñata, which had spilled candy all over my garden when a teenager hit it without permission. The conservation officer issued 17 citations for jet ski violations. My dock needed $800 in repairs from the stress damage. A month later, Claudia stood before the judge in a beige pantsuit, her HOA president's sash notably absent. She pleaded down, but the judge wasn't sympathetic after hearing about the elaborate scheme. She agreed to restitution for the damages totaling $8,000, which included my dock repairs, new siding where she drilled the lockbox, restoration of the shoreline, and removal of her signs. She received 240 hours of community service, specifically scraping gum off the HOA tennis courts she once policed like a border crossing, plus maintaining the very garden beds she used to fine others for neglecting. The judge issued a 5-year ban from holding any board position anywhere in the county and required her to write letters of apology to all 300 attendees. She stood there in the courtroom, her face turning purple as the judge read the sentence, muttering something about ungrateful residents and community haters, while her lawyer tried desperately to quiet her down, finally placing his hand over the microphone as she hissed that I'd never understand the vision of a unified neighborhood.